Translocation by Are Thoresen, Chapter 2. All internal diseases are caused by demons, distorted elemental beings, created by our wrong thoughts, egotistic feelings, and evil actions. The implications of translocation within human and veterinary medicine. The void into which alien entities may enter. The upsetting claim that all diseases, in both man and women, in their children and in their animals, have the origin in the human entity, needs some explanation. All diseases are translocated from the strongest, alpha being, human being, to the animal. Such translocation can also happen between adults and children, and also between adults themselves. It then usually is translocated from a stronger human being to a weaker one. This is why diseases almost never translocate from animals to humans, although this might happen. Likewise, with weaker humans and children, they are usually the suffering target of such translocation. We have then to understand what is translocated. How can such translocated items cause disease? In Chapter 2, I will describe the mechanism of such translocation in animals. In Chapter 3, the different ways of dealing with them. And in Chapter 4, how the described items are created. So, what is this something inhabiting the body that can translocate? The first time I saw this something was in Bordeaux in 1980, when I was a veterinarian in this area of northern Norway. This day, my wife, at that time, had a visit from a friend. When I came into the room, I saw a structure halfway out of her friend's left skull, halfway within the head. It was like a spiral, similar to a coiled snake or a skein of wool. She told me that she was suffering from a painful migraine. I went towards this woman and took hold of the energetic structure with my hand. I pulled the structure halfway out, and the woman said that the pain diminished, almost disappeared. Then I let go of the structure, and it slipped immediately back into the head of the woman. "Ow!" she said, "now the pain has come back." Again I grabbed hold of the structure and pulled it all the way out. The migraine totally disappeared. I was very careful with what I did to the structure that I held in my hand. I went to the open window and threw the structure out. It did not return. In the following years, in fact until today, I have asked myself again and again, what was that structure, from where had it come, and where did it go after I threw it out of the window? Did it come back? Did it go to someone else? These questions became very important for me. The answers to these questions are essential to understanding the existence of such pathological structures, later in this book called demons, how they are translocated, and their part in disease, especially the human-animal pathological connection. Often, when I have treated diseases with homeopathy or acupuncture, which I have used much in my practice on animals and their owners, the symptoms often moved around in the body. Over 3 to 4 months of repeated treatment, a migraine could move down into the hand and stay as pain in the little finger for some time before it vanished in the thin air. As a medically trained person, I know that migraine is caused by a pulsating artery that affects a nerve in the head, so this moving around appeared quite strange to me, quite unexplainable. I then had to pose the very important question to myself: what is it that travels from the brain into the little finger and after a while disappears? Then I began to see and understand more and more what the reality behind the travelling structures of diseases was. They are structures that have their own life, which can travel in the body from top to bottom. They can also jump over to another person or to an animal. Not only can they do this, this jumping and travelling and changing is a fundamental property of these demons. They are structures that are alive. Ordinary treatment with physiotherapy, osteopathy, acupuncture, painkillers, and other allopathic medicines usually, only move these structures to other places in the body or to other individuals. In discussing this phenomenon with colleagues, both acupuncturists, zone therapists, and even Qigong therapists, they are all aware of the danger that such entities shall jump over to themselves, and they are very careful to prevent this from happening. To prevent this is actually a part of their education. Very few have given the thought that such pathological entities can jump over to others, to the wife or neighbour when they come home, to the horse when they go to the stable, or to their children, a proper and serious consideration. In my practice, as well as in the practices of all my colleagues, I became painfully aware that we all just translocate the noxious structures called demons, the symptoms, and for this we receive money. If one reviews the literature of various alternative medical systems, there are revelations that show this translocation phenomena was already being observed by some of the great physicians of homeopathy, such as Dr. Constantine Hering, the author of Hering's Laws of Cure. Dr. Constantine Hering, MD, 1800 to 1880. Dr. Hering is apparently called the father of homeopathy in America. Originally a skeptic of homeopathy, he was convinced of its efficiency after an objective study of its principles. He went on to expound upon the laws of cure. The name demon calls forth disbelief in many readers. I could have described these demonic entities as pathological or noxious structures of either yin or yang quality with their own life, but this would not be honest. I prefer to call them by their old name, demons. The pathological or noxious structure of yin quality with its own life I call an Ahrimanic demon. The pathological or noxious structure of yang quality with its own life I call a luciferic demon. When we treat, either with homeopathy, acupuncture or herbs, there are two possible outcomes from a seemingly successful treatment. The pathological structure is dissolved, transformed. It is translocated. If we treat the symptoms, which we may call the excess, even if we treat the cause, which we may call the deficiency, the pathological structure may just be transposed, translocated. We think then that the disease is healed, but it is just hidden, symptomatically changed, moved or translocated to another being. For a long time I have observed this occurrence both for me and for my colleagues. I would say that it happens in 100% of all allopathic school medicine treatments and in 90% of all alternative treatments when the excess is addressed, that is, the area of pain or symptoms. It happens in 40% when the deficiency is addressed, and mostly when treated with the 5-element system, see Chapter 3. It rarely happens when a treatment is with the 7 or 12-element system, seldom when the 90-degree method is used, see Chapter 3, sometimes when the star method is used, see Chapter 3, almost never when the middle point is addressed, see Chapter 3. The most important question for me in these latter years has been how to dissolve or transform the disease-causing elementals called demons and not just translocate them to others. This described translocation gives the foundation of the observed pathological connection between all living entities. There is a strong energetic connection between all levels of creation, and we are all connected energetically through the existence of the elementals, both the benign beings and the malign beings, the so-called demons. 3 types of demons. In the spiritual world, on the other side of the threshold, there are many kinds of entities, just as in the physical world. Here, in the physical world, we may meet innumerable types of beings. Some are beneficial to us, some are indifferent, and some are dangerous. In the spiritual world, it is just as in the physical world, and those beings or entities that are dangerous to us we call adversaries. There are many different types of these adversaries, but to make it easier to define them, we may divide them into 3 groups. The Ahrimanic beings, demons or Ahrimanic demons, which are Ahrimanic adversarial entities in the etheric realm which want us to be more materialistic and deny the spiritual world. The luciferic beings, spectres or luciferic demons, which are luciferic adversarial entities in the astral realm which want us to lose ourselves in our own subjective experiences of the spiritual world. The azuric beings, phantoms or azuric demons, which are azuric adversarial entities in both the physical and spiritual realms, attacking the physical body as well as the I or I organization, who wants us to lose our I or make the I egoistic and unsuitable for the spiritual world. I mentioned earlier that if we are not conscious inside our separated soul parts with our awakened I, then alien and malignant forces have the possibility of entering our being. A meeting with these powers, internal or external, seems to be inevitable when working with crossing the threshold and passing into the spiritual world. All diseases have their origin in the spiritual world, caused by the presence of demonic structures. How are demons created? On what do they feed? Earth radiation and karma. How are demons created? I've come to understand that they are all created by evil or egoistic deeds of humans and feed on the upward streaming forces of the deeper layers of the earth. If the human being that created the elemental demon is dead, a grid line in the earth, which we today call earth radiation, still remains as a trace or mark of the deed. In the period when the originator of the grid line has entered the spiritual world, i.e. is dead, the grid line is left alone here in the physical world. Here it may cause disease or discomfort in other humans or animals that happen to sleep or live where the lines are. In a later life, when the originator of the line is reincarnated, the spirit of this reincarnated human is drawn to the site where the line awaits. When he or she then comes again to the area of past sin, the past misdeed, the grid lines, demons, attach to the human who then consciously or unconsciously remembers these past actions. It is known within criminology that the perpetrator always returns to the site of the crime. The earth radiation lines are really elementals. If they are created by benevolent deeds, they are just called elementals. If they are created by malevolent deeds, they are called demonic elementals or demons, and they are disease-creating, connected to our karma. If the originator is in the other world, the demons may haunt other people whilst they wait for their makers to be reborn. These lines or grids contain the whole history of our lives and are called the Akashic Chronicle. Karma and the Akashic Chronicle are interwoven in this grid and are two parts or realities of the earth radiation. It must be understood the whole world is full of these demons, demonic grids fed by the upward streaming of Ahrimanic forces from the depths. They are of many kinds and appearances. Some are made by greed, others from anger, through murder, violence, jealousy, and from pain or sorrow. Demons will also be created through deeds of violence towards nature. If we cut down a tree, if we kill weeds or insects by the help of chemicals, Roundup, if we slaughter a healthy cow or horse, or if we cut down whole areas of forest with huge machines, strong, disharmonic demons will be created that later can translocate to humans and further to animals. Demons can be divided into two groups according to when and how they were created. 1. Demons created by human actions. 2. Demons existing from earlier cosmic development. I find it extremely difficult to make a differentiation between these two groups, as both groups appear so similar. However, I know from my work that they are different. Demons are always involved in the development of disease occurring in animals and in man. Concerning diseases in humans relating to both the body and the soul, the most significant demons are those we have created ourselves through our actions, thoughts, and feelings. They may be called our karmic demons or the karmic doppelganger. Example: I was visiting a friend of mine. He was often thrown into severe depressions and could not work for weeks or months. He had no idea from where these depressions came. At the time I was visiting him, he was in a better period. I sat at the table and he went to the kitchen to make me a coffee and espresso. As he was doing this, a huge dark shadow slowly engulfed him and he sank into a dark mood. This dark mood that descended upon him was the cause of his repeated depressions. I tried to ask the demon from whence it came, but it would not answer. I further asked the entity how old it was, and finally it responded that it had been created by a dark action committed by my friend's grandfather. The action had to do with an act of low morality. The next step would be to find out what this was and then ask for forgiveness. If this is properly performed, the demon will disperse and vanish, having been freed and transformed. We must not just push the demon away, it wants to be transformed. Demons and earth radiation. So-called earth radiation has two aspects: the semi-physical expression of the created demons, the upstreaming forces of evil beings from early history of the world residing in the deeper layers of the world. This etheric force from the depth of the earth are very central in understanding the nature of demons, Ahrimanic beings and disease. My development in seeing and understanding earth radiation is much the same as my path in seeing and understanding pathologic demons. I understood from early on that they belong together, that they are one and the same. Since 1972 I've been investigating ley lines and earth grids, so-called earth radiation, especially since from 2004 when I began to see this matrix of energy. This energy is spiritual energy, as no one has as yet been able to prove the existence of it with electric instruments or other kinds of devices. It can only be detected by living beings. I am aware that there is also a huge grid of electromagnetic energy that causes diseases in living beings. This is especially noticeable in connection with emissions from high voltage installations and cell phones. This is something I will come back to later in chapter 5, but here I will write about the spiritual energetic grid that has a spiritual origin. The spiritual energy on which the demons are feeding is an emanation from the demonic layers of the earth itself. At the same time, it is also the expression of the Ahrimanic entities created by human misdeeds throughout all times. This spiritual substance is thus both the demonic entities themselves and a kind of fuel or food for the Ahrimanic entities. Such emanations fuel the karmic demons and cause disease, especially if one sleeps over this radiation or is connected to it. This matrix or grid of earth radiation is changeable. It is alive and has its own intent. The next level of my observations was as follows. I discovered that the lines of earth radiation not only changed, but moved several meters by themselves, especially if someone tried to alter, disperse, or stop them. Then I made the astonishing observation that they could also be moved by my own will and intent. I started to demonstrate this possibility to dowsers. During a dowsing congress, I moved a ley line through the room so fast that many of the participants felt it like a soft wind that swept through the room. I carry out this moving of earth radiation according to the following method. First, I have to see the energetic lines. After seeing the energy, the snakes, I fixate it with my willpower, just as we might fixate a naughty child when we require its attention or when we want the child to act as we wish. Then I move the snake by willpower and intent to another place. This technique is much the same as I used to move the northern lights as described in chapter 5. They follow my command and move. In the Old Norse book, the Edda, a similar structure or phenomenon as the earth radiation and deep upstreaming forces of the earth is described relating to the Norns. The old Vikings saw that when a child was born, a web was waiting for it. 3 women were waiting to connect the child to this web, which was the karma of this newborn being. The names of the 3 women were past, present and future, Billy, vai and vedandi. The Norns also had scissors to cut the thread when the task of this life was fulfilled. This is, for me, an accurate description of the karmic web, the cause of its existence and how it is created. I observed this karmic web in connection with all human beings. When I started to understand this, I clearly saw the connections between Earth radiation and humans. I saw how the actions of man created or attracted, translocation, the snake's demons, and how these demons created diseases and disasters in man. Such demons may also create disease in people who live close by or are attached to those who carry the demons, translocation. It has been observed throughout the time that living or sleeping on Earth radiation may cause disease, and also that it is impossible to free yourself from these demons unless you know how. Summary. All our actions through passion, such as greed, hate, jealousy, and anger, create luciferic demons. All deeds carried out with the help of machines, cold forts, slaughterhouses, or cutting down trees create Ahrimanic demons. All deeds that betray the truth, lead people astray, or betray religious beliefs create Azuric demons. We may say that demons of a lower rank than humans, especially those of the 3 elemental regions, are created by man. The void. When an elemental spirit, a demon, or any other benign or malignant spirit enters you, influences you, or actually possesses you, there must be an empty room available, some weakness or a void into where it is possible to indwell. This is of utmost importance to know relating to spiritual possessions, use of alcohol or drugs, development of diseases, hypersensitivity, exposure to electromagnetic radiation, openness to Ahriman and Lucifer. In the beginning of man's evolution, we ourselves use this method or possibility of entering or possessing other beings, entering into the void of their spiritual construction. According to Edgar Cayce, when the first group of human souls entered the Earth sphere in the Lemurian times, they entered into or actually possessed animal forms to experience the pleasures of the earthly existence. In Genesis, they were called the sons or daughters of man. But alas, they were trapped in these forms, not able to re-enter the spiritual world. The next group of souls entering the earthly realm was the rescue party, who came to help the trapped sons of man back to God, incarnating in human forms, which later were developed to reach the perfection of life that can house a conscious I. This second group, in Genesis they were called the sons or daughters of God, came to help or rescue the first group and free them from the material prison they had put themselves in. This second group was also trapped deeply into materialism due to the cunning plans of the devil, and in the end Christ himself had to come to rescue them all. According to Rudolf Steiner, the animal forms were created as side products to the human development, but still some of the immature human souls incarnated too soon and gave life to apes and higher animals who must be considered as our brothers and sisters and need our help and salvation. A healthy human being fills out his or her physical body entirely with the etheric and astral sheets. But there are very few healthy humans. We are all weakened somewhat and somewhere, depending on our individual lives, individual karma, and individual beliefs. It is important to understand that how we eat, how we think or act, how our moral behavior influences our lives, makes certain weaknesses in our spiritual physical makeup. Such weaknesses create portals through which alien spirits or spiritual influences may enter. If we, for example, have no consciousness about our food and eat fast food every day, such as is found at McDonald's, then after a few weeks or months, our liver will be weakened in its etheric makeup so much that it will be open for an alien invasion or the creation of adversary entities. An Ahrimanic spirit can develop from our own etheric forces, or an already created Ahrimanic demon can enter. This creates a deficient disease, as the symptoms then always show a lessening of activity. This Ahrimanic elemental demonic entity invites or creates a luciferic demon, and this demon shows considerably more clear symptoms than the Ahrimanic one, and is thus called an excessive disease. Therefore, most diseases are a cooperation between the Ahrimanic and the luciferic demons, the luciferic dwelling cranial towards the head, and the Ahrimanic dwelling distal towards the feet. Between these two we find the middle point, or the area I call the Christ point. If we strengthen this area, the two adversarial forces will be transformed and weakened. Other causes for opening for an invasion of adversarial forces may be the use of alcohol and drugs. If, for example, there is too big an opening in the defensive power of the body due to a weakening of the etheric or astral strength, certain portals may be created, and through such portals alien entities or influences may enter, and the result is often seen as hypersensitivity and allergy. The hypersensitivity of electromagnetic radiation, EMR, will be dealt with in Chapter 6. There are, to my knowledge, in principle, 4 ways to help or treat such an influx of entities or unwanted spirituality due to having a too wide opening of portals or weakening of the protective force of the etheric or astral sheet. 1. Translocate the spirits out, as in exorcism. 2. Make room for the Christ force in the middle to transform the unwanted luciferic or Ahrimanic spirits. 3. Close the door that allows the spirits in. 4. Fill the void by changing the detrimental way of living. The planned void of the brain and the heart. According to Rudolf Steiner, part of the divine plan to rescue humanity from the curse of materialism was put in motion in 1721, when the preparations of the spiritualization of man began. The first move is to slowly part the etheric body from the head, so that it will be possible to develop spiritual connections to the spiritual world and also develop clairvoyance. Later, in the 1900s, the etheric body started to separate from the heart, so that spiritual activity had the possibility to develop in the heart region. This means that all the forces of both the head and the heart concerning the etheric body, astral body and I are free from the material body, and as such free to work in the spiritual realm. If this work is not done, if the void is not filled out with your own spirituality, then luciferic and Ahrimanic forces may slip in and take possession of our humanity. The same phenomenon may also be observed relating to the skin and the modern epidemic of obesity. This obesity concerns the skin, which acts as an organ of supersensible observation. As discussed before, the skin as a sense organ expresses the sense of touch, temperature, and the eye sense. The physically related organ that is associated with these senses, the skin, is interestingly divided into 3 layers: epidermis, dermis corium, and subcutis. So the level of sensing of the physical, the imagination, has a sense in relation to that of touch, and has the zodiacal sign of Cancer, which relates to the physical body part of the skin, the epidermis. The level of sensing of the mental inspiration has the sense and relation of temperature to the zodiacal sign of Aquarius, which is related to the physical body part of the skin, the dermis. The spiritual intuition has the sense of the eye of others and relates to the zodiacal sign of Gemini, and has the physical body part of the skin, subcutis. Below are my own early observations in connection with the 3 skin senses, related to imagination, touch, inspiration, temperature, and intuition, eye sense. These observations were made during the first time I started my veterinary training in Oslo, before I had even heard of anthroposophy. In the first years of my studies, I spent some time between lectures watching tourists, especially those who were overweight. At that time, this was mostly Americans, but today the problem is universal. I saw, with my spiritual eye, that in many of these people the skin, especially around men's stomachs, was stretched in such a way that the physical fat layer was outside the normal etheric body. The fat tissue was detached, loosely hanging out of the ether body. In this way, the effect of the skin as a spiritual sense organ, which allows for, amongst other things, clairvoyance, was reduced. In other words, obesity can have a debilitating effect on all the three supersensible abilities expressed in imagination, touch sense, inspiration, temperature sense, and intuition, eye sense. Therefore, when a person is on a weight reduction program, they are in a better position to be able to develop their spiritual feelings, since the etheric body may eventually resemble the skin, even go beyond the skin. This is a necessity for the development of real clairvoyance, which today is happening in relation to the head and the heart for all humanity. The effect of slimming will reduce Ahriman's and Lucifer's detrimental effects on this particular emotional organ. To understand how obesity can affect spirituality, we must look again into the skin's relation to the etheric body and the spiritual blueprint of the body. We must then understand how Rudolf Steiner described clairvoyance as a relationship between the physical body, ether body, and astral body, especially when the spiritual bodies extend beyond the physical form. For example, the etheric body of humans living in the old Atlantic period was outside of the physical material body, especially in the region of the head. In this way, Atlanteans were clairvoyant and able to observe the etheric world, but not consciously as we do today. However, if the etheric body is within the boundaries of the physical body, supersensible vision is greatly reduced. I have shown in my book on demons that most of our spiritual sense organs are in the process of being taken over by Ahrimanic and Luciferic powers. This is seen in the eye through the use of electronic screens and in the ear through the use of electronic music. It seems to me that the Ahrimanic and Luciferic sensory organs have developed both in line with our growing love of technology, especially over the last 20 years, and with the growing epidemic of obesity throughout the world today. This epidemic is perhaps the greatest danger to our spiritual development, and the opposition forces have cunningly linked the addiction and desire for sugar and food to the same dopamine system that heroin is associated with. The modern disease of civilization, obesity, will thereby be able to partly remove the imagination, inspiration, and intuition from our spiritual potential and surrender these into the claws of the opposition.